now.
On
Yeah.
Facebook.
I'm working on it now.
I just got a button that came up that says meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. So is that things take me much longer to prepare. So, I mean, I've led countless Friday night services for Shabbat, and I know more or less how long it's going to take me to prepare it. It's taking me double the time now because the formatting and the experience of it is totally different. And I'm working with, as my temple folks know, Jason McKinney, who's serving as our cantorial soloist. So he and I have worked together, but not in this particular context.
Yeah.
So we had a whole rehearsal today to basically do the whole service so that, which on the one hand is really nice because that way when we're actually doing the service, we can really experience it better.
Yep.
But it means there's the prep before our meeting, then our rehearsal, which is longer than the service itself is going to be. And then, of course, we'll be back tomorrow night to do it. So that's a big change that I'm
exactly the same. I was making the comment today that I'm doing 1/3 the number of Sunday services. So not doing 3 as normal, doing 1. But it takes me at least 3 times as long to do 1/3 of the services than normal because now you have to figure out how am I going to do it? How do we do? Because on any given week, on a Friday night or Sunday morning, the template is the same, and you know what to do. The readings change, the music maybe change, but you know what to expect and what to do. Now we have to figure out what is a way to take what is designed to be experienced in person to a way that can be translated on a flat screen, if at all possible. You have to plan for it, prepare for it, produce it, do it. And then for me, I do some live and some pre-recorded. Sunday morning I pre-record mainly because we don't have the technology to have the quality where you can hear well on Sunday morning. So if I do it beforehand, I can put a little more time into it. But it takes 7-8 hours to then edit and produce all that. So that's just for 1 hour on Sunday morning. So it's been completely a different way of working. I'm not having in-office traffic like I used to and pastoral care things and like that. But now I am Steven Spielberg meets Mark Zuckerberg, meets, whatever else. And it's stressful because from week to week, it's been changing and you're not sure what to expect. Are we going to be in person? Are we going to be still on sort of shutdown? And so for you, I have someone above me that says to all the Episcopal churches in North Carolina, okay, you're shut down until May 17th. Are you just going by what the governor says or by what the mayor says, or are you having to respond to a higher, not a higher authority? Of course, we're all responding to a higher authority, but a higher.
Do you remember
sort
the
of,
Hebrew
a
National
higher,
ad? We respond.
Exactly.
We answer to a higher authority.
A higher judicatory that's saying, Rabbi Mark, you and Temple Emmanuel have to be out.
The kind of the national movement of Reformed Jewish life, so to speak, is not kind of issuing what we should do. We're following whatever the state mayor, governor is saying for us right now. And the truth of the matter is, part of this discussion that I know we're all having, and by the way, Cynthia just texted, we're still not up on Facebook. I'm not sure.
No, I got a text saying we are.
Oh, great. Okay. Even when, and who even knows, because that's such a moving target, when things open up, how comfortable are we going to feel to go back out?
Yeah.
That is a big question for us right now. And I know that, just switching back this discussion about kind of how things are different for us as service leaders that, I trust that you, like me as an extrovert, we feed off of people being in the room.
I can't preach to a camera. It's horrible. I can't do it.
It's like there's no reaction.
No, none. Even sleeping is a reaction. We know what's going on then. But just to the red light on the camera is horrible.
One night I'm doing the service and I could have sworn that the camera had a little red light that was supposed to blink. And there's no red light. So I jump up, Jason's singing, and I jump up to go check, and sure enough, somehow it was still going. And so there's all that's having to play in the back of our heads while both making sure that things are running right, while also hopefully providing something that is spiritually, emotionally uplifting and suitable for that day. because and flowing in. I mean, you just came through Easter. We just came through Passover. How I found Passover to be. I mean, first of all, it is always a meaningful holiday by default of what it is. But it really took on new meaning this year. The idea of being confined and yet we're free. What does it mean to be free? What does it mean to be confined? Was really as another one of those dichotomies, like these words that we keep hearing bannered about of, we're together and apart.
Yeah. I have two questions for you. First, I have a commercial. We want to raise money for the staff at Finnegan's Wake, and we normally would tip them as we are exactly. Shoot, my glass is in the other room. I have the same. Hang on.
We're both very proud of our Finnegan's Wake swag. Let's be clear.
It is. This is God bless Alan Kirby. This has nothing in it, but we would normally pass around. We would tip the wonderful staff who's been so good to us for nearly a decade. So here's how we can do this. There are two ways, and I'm gonna do this several times during the night, and we'll put it in the chat in the chat and the comments as well. You can Venmo if you are into Venmo, and I just downloaded the app before we started, and I gave money before we went online to @Karami-Kale, and I'll type that in a minute. To Venmo.
I'm putting that in right now. It's Venmo. It's @Karami, capital K Karami.
Yep. Dash capital K Kale. And that's going to the support staff. And also, or a more traditional way is to mail a check, memo line, support staff to Finnegan's Wake at 620 North Trade Street, Winston-Salem, 27101. 620 North Trade Street, zip code 27101, memo line, support staff, or Venmo, Karami-Kale. So we're grateful to them, and we wish them every blessing during this strange time. You ready for my question for you? I have two of them.
Sure, I'm just typing up this thing here. I've also learned is at my, I need computer glasses. That's what I think. Because of my bifocals, I spend my life looking at the computer like this. Yes.
My first question is a little deeper, and my second question is more practical. I'm going to make the assumption that what's been so difficult for me, and I'm assuming for you, is that Judaism, like Christianity, is not a mere philosophy. It's not something, it's not just an idea that you latch onto. It is something that you embody. It is completely a way of life.
It is.
And that makes it very difficult to lead communities together when you are not physically in community, because Passover, although I know Passover is done at home, for us, for instance, what the priests do is to celebrate these rituals and these acts that the priests are set apart to do, and only the priests can do. And so when you're not able to be together, it completely changes our whole understanding of what it means to live out our faith. It's not meant to be a philosophical undertaking that we sit on our own and contemplate. We live it, and we live it together.
Right.
So is number one, is that a fair assumption for what your tradition is like? Is that it of course never was meant to be done virtually at all?
I mean, look, the truth of the matter is, an office told the joke of you can't be a Jew you could be a Jew on a deserted island. Maybe a very happy Jew on a deserted island, by the way. But how would you fulfill any number of commandments if you're alone?
Well, and the minion, right?
On being a part of a community, Say it again, Steve.
So even having a minion, right? To you had to have.
That's exactly. I mean, that's a real go-to. I mean, the idea of being part of this prayer quorum of 10. How would you do that if you're alone? We mentioned the other day, when Ezra reads the Torah, as in the biblical Ezra, and this idea of public reading and recitation of Torah. That's something that it implies, that idea that we do it together. Even, quite frankly, even if you are studying Torah alone, we never just read the scripture straight and figure, okay, check, that was done. we're going to read it with the commentaries that go with it. And these are commentaries, whether they be rabbinic or they're medieval or they're contemporary. There needs to be a table full of people studying Torah. When we get together to worship, it implies that we're all together. And there have been some very interesting discussions about, can you make a virtual minyan? In other words, are we qualified that we have 10? If I'm looking everyone in the room right now, so to speak, does this qualify as a minyan? Well, some have said no, because you need to physically be present. And others say, but if everyone has a prayer book in their hands and you can actively see their mouths moving, then that's a minyan. And we will count that as one as a legitimate minyan.
We have similar conversations like, can you make your confession to me over Zoom?
Virtually. So what's the answer on that?
The more traditional response, which is the one that I would lean to, is no. Okay. It needs to be in person. I think mainly because that's sort of a slippery slope on there. So this is the second part of the first question. Then I have two. Do you have any anxiety or are you nervous that in our need to be able to communicate our traditions, our faith online for the next month, maybe longer, that we'll become so good at it, or that people will come to like it so much that when we're allowed to come back together, they might prefer a virtual experience as opposed to an embodied experience?
Gosh, that's a great question. And that would be something, if people want to put up, I sometimes refer to the chat box in Zoom as the Rashi commentary. Rashi is this great medieval biblical commentator. His notes literally are in the margin of the page. The chat box is a nice place if people want to answer that question also. What happens if we start to like this virtual community? I mean, we at Temple Emmanuel in Winston-Salem, we offer a live stream platform on our Temple webpage. You can look at services. I also put them up on my Facebook page. But if you can go to a minyan that's happening in New York, in Jerusalem, in Atlanta, whatever it is, and you really like those, what happens to your engagement locally? Now, someone just chatted up and said, why can't we do both? And I think that's a great point. Of a healthy synthesis of the two is possible. And I still buy books. I know about Kindle and Audible, and I get books on Audible on occasion, but I still buy books because there's nothing to me that could ever replace the actual physical book. Yeah. And yet it's really nice to listen to Audible when I'm taking a walk or whatever it is, or in an airplane.
No, clearly. I mean, we're not anti-technology, or we wouldn't be doing this right now.
That's exactly right.
But a friend of mine responded to a similar question I posed on Twitter, and they said, hang on, I'm getting the text from the Facebook. The response was that they have been watching online church after all the things they needed to do, like work or run or do the errands. And so then my anxiety is that if we do it this way, and of course we're doing this live now, but if they can't make it live, they can catch it later. It's going to be saved on Facebook. Is that okay? Right. So my faith is going to be something that now it's so accessible and convenient. I'll fit it in when I have time. Whereas not too long, it's always been, you fit life around your faith, right?
Well, but that's been part of the challenge of faith, over as we've talked about what happens in our faith communities, that we're facing a situation today that people have not been willing to shape their life around our traditions. Which is
6 days you shall labor and 1 you shall rest, right? I mean, that's how it's supposed to be set up.
Right? Amen. Yeah, and these are the days, right? You can't do Shabbat on Thursday night. Yeah. But it's so much more convenient on Sunday morning. I mean, my God, living in a non-Jewish world, right? For us, it would be so much easier if we did our Shabbat on Sunday morning, but we can't do that. Like, this is when it is. But if people now put their faith into a space when it works for them, but that means that they're actually now doing something when before they wouldn't have. Pardon me, and I'm just watching these comments come up, which have been great.
Yeah.
you know, we're getting people on this call that would not have come out to Finnegan's Wake on Thursday night for any number of reasons, right? Work or proximity. They have better beer selection in their refrigerator. I don't know, but so we've started Torah study on Saturday morning again, and I know we're getting people in on that Torah study that wouldn't have chimed in otherwise, which is really lovely. So it opens up, I think, some new. A new thing. Now, Cynthia just texted that the Zoom community, the Facebook community is saying the need for community is 3, the virtual is 0. And someone chimed in also about watching, and this is happening in your space also. People are going to funerals over Facebook and Zoom out of the necessity right now. That kind of thing, please God, is not going to continue because we will be able to attend funerals again.
Yeah, I agree.
When that time comes. That being said, I've certainly done bar and bat mitzvahs where there's a grandparent who can't travel, and so we very quietly placed a phone in the front pew that no one realized was on, and they were FaceTiming us so they could see their grandchild have a bar mitzvah. Like,
listen,
okay, that's nice.
I've said this at a real live Finnegan's on Priest and Rabbi before. My favorite wedding of all time.
Yeah.
Let me correct that in case someone whose wedding I've done is tuning in. One of my favorite weddings of all time was a few years ago. It was for a Syrian refugee escaping ISIS, and her family moved here, coming via High Point because of
the
World Relief Agency. World Relief, and coming in here and settled here and married another Syrian who'd been in the country for a while. And she could speak no English. She had someone there to help her understand, and I was convinced she knew what she was getting into. So I was happy to do the wedding. But here's the point: when she came down the aisle, the entire Syrian community who was in this area, which is I was so ignorant as to how large it is around, they all came. And you know, like the naval weddings or the military weddings where the sabers are drawn and the couple walks through the sabers drawn. I kid you not, as she walked down the aisle, and I'm such a stickler and formal and traditionalist and would hate this under any circumstance, but there were like 40 selfie sticks coming out onto the aisle, but all FaceTiming back to Syria.
Yeah.
And it was a powerful thing. It was one of my favorite weddings. So I'm not afraid of the technology. I am anxious as to about how the longer we're in this, how people will be formed and what it will mean, which leads to my second question. And then I think we can look at some of the group chats.
And well, can I hit pause for 1 second on that? Which is, this was one of my opening sermons when we first went into this whole business, which was the idea that we're not socially distancing. In fact, if anything, we were more socially connected than I think we actually were.
Yeah. We're
physically distancing, and we should be.
Yes.
But this whole idea, you know, we've got like, I think I saw there's like 3 pages of faces on here. That's great. I mean, that's
52.
Really nice.
It's extraordinary.
And in each screen,
it's it
often is more than one person. So, and we got people out there on Facebook. God bless you all. But I think I've often said this to Father Steve that, you know, we have a good time with each other, but it's about everybody coming together, and this is what we're doing. And people, we like to see each other in a space, and it really helps. The comments say, help us see this. It's another level for us to talk to each other, which is nice, and for you all to talk to each other. Anyway, say what's your second thing?
So this is a pivot from my first, which sounded like a critique that this is, you know, get off my lawn, meaning to go back to the way things were, and I hate all this stuff. Once we are in phase 3, I watched the task force briefing before we came on, and everything is back to the quote unquote new normal. What's the one tool or practice that you've had to adopt during this time that you will keep once we're no longer having to keep physical distance from one another?
That's a great question. I mean, there's kind of a quick one that would come to mind. It's an easy one, which is this new platform of live streaming that we have on our website. that people can jump up and see the service live as it's happening, and it stays archived up there so people can go and watch it later if they want. That seems one that we would definitely want to keep.
What's your biggest live stream goof? Other than jumping up and running to the camera to see if the light was on, and it was on.
But that's an easy one. I mean, I don't know. Please, I don't know that I've had one that is worthy of note.
Shouldn't have said that.
I'm right. I know. So tune in tomorrow night. It ought to be a good one.
It's going to be a record attendance. You're going to break the internet tomorrow night because we're going to watch.
It's going to crash. The whole thing will come down. Why is the internet broken?
I had one this past week. I forgot.
What's yours? You evidently have one. What's yours?
Well, it wasn't live stream, but I had already. It was too late, and I wasn't going to fix it. But this is more complicated than I want to get into. But Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, the Orthodox world, Christian Orthodox world, still goes by for the most part to the old Julian calendar, whereas most Western Christians follow the Gregorian calendar, which means Easter for us was this past Sunday. Easter for like our friends at the Greek Orthodox Church will be this coming Sunday. And I made just a sloppy error and conflated both Easters into one day. And, normally if I had said that on a Sunday morning homily, I would have corrected that as later or through the line. So, yep, sorry, my bad. But now that it's out there and it's online forever, right? And that's something that I had to do a disclaimer as I posted the video.
I did think of that the other night. I was chanting a prayer, and I know I mispronounced a word. I was off. It was not a huge error. It was a vowel that was off, and I thought, that's going to haunt me.
Yeah.
Like I like to get it right. All of a sudden now, that guy doesn't know how to pronounce that word. I know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, exactly.
Funny sometimes.
Sorry. So what's the one thing, or one or two things that you will keep going once this is over?
So the live stream as a platform on our website. Bless you.
Hang on.
Someone's sneezing.
I missed a mute. There we go. Got him.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia.
Now you can sneeze all you want to now.
Cynthia says there was the time your laptop was visible. That's right. It's because the camera angle and you could see my lid of my laptop. Yeah, it's nice. Thank God I like the lid of my laptop. I'm very proud of the stickers I have on it. I don't know. We've reformatted our regular our email system of what we do to Temple. We've done for many years now a Wednesday email. It's kind of our main email, and we've switched to doing basically a 3-day a week thing. We call it Staying Connected, and it's tends to be a shorter format until I decide that I want to throw a new one out. Like tomorrow, there's going to be a special one, all focused on Israel stuff. So kind of a shorter emails, but more frequently. I actually have had somebody say that they have felt very, more connected than ever with the temple, which is interesting, thinking that we're not actually physically getting together.
Yeah.
Do you think it's people calling one another in the temple? And yeah.
Do you think it's because we start to familiarity breeds contempt, and we have it all the time and we take it for granted, but once it's now taken from us, we now start to appreciate it and miss it, and so we want that community, and we miss all those things.
Yeah.
The thing that I will continue is
what about it?
I think things like this. I think there are a lot of meetings that can be done over Zoom than having to come together in person to person. I've been doing a lot of those. I think that what's interesting for me is that I've seen my colleagues and myself, and I haven't done as much, has really returned back to a lot of teaching, because our only interaction is online through live stream or videos that we make or podcasts that we record, which that's only a good thing that we return back to teaching. And I mentioned before we went on Facebook Live that I've been walking most every day that I can. And I put my, earbuds in and take my phone and will walk miles and listen to podcasts. And, today I listened to a lecture about Queen Elizabeth entering into London in 1559 and some other medical podcasts and just all that sort of stuff. And now we have the tools and the need to create that content, which is a better way to communicate with people. And I think that's exciting. I think people now, they're more captive, that it may be easier. I'll tell you though, the thing that's been the most difficult for me, surprising, is that without the rhythm of daily prayer in community, I find it much more difficult to say my prayers every day. I still struggle to do them, and I do them, but I get real lazy with it. Because usually, in our tradition, or in our church, we have, morning prayers at 8:15 and evening prayers at 4:45, and I have a small group there every time, and they expect me to be there. But now that schedule is greatly diminished, and that's been a real challenge.
Self-motivation is tough.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question about that. I struggle with that for myself. I mean, it's hard to get myself. Whereas if I have a fixed thing, I'm pretty good about it.
Let's check some of the chats here on Zoom. Thank you so much. Let's see. I know, Rabbi Mark, Brad had a question very early on about plagues. Do you see it? It's to me. It says, question for me and Mark. Plagues were meaningful in the Old Testament and had religious significance for the people. Are any faith traditions, Jewish, Christian, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, etc., approaching COVID-19 in a similar way today? And if so, how? I would say yes.
So I don't know if I've read of anything. I always get nervous with the word plague in association with something like COVID-19 because I don't want to conflate the plagues as in the 10 big ones that hit Egypt with the Passover story, that those were God sent. I wouldn't want to look and say, oh, God is sending us COVID-19. That being said, I think it is appropriate for us as humanity to look at illness or this virus in particular and say, why is this here and what's our response to it? I don't see it as something that God has brought on us, though. I wouldn't be surprised though if there are religious groups who are saying, no, this is, the same way there were people who came along and said, well, the hurricane hits and kills all these people because they're sinners and whatever.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about that for a second. Well, I mean, there are two things I would think about. I mean, it's interesting when I hear plague, I think like Black Death. I don't immediately go to locusts and frogs and that sort of thing. And I think about what was the church's response and what was the church's interpretation of what that meant. We can also, I think it's probably too big for this conversation tonight to talk about if God didn't send it. God, one could argue, certainly allowed it, which is a conversation to be had, and for what purpose. But what's interesting is that Pope Francis used a crucifix in Rome that tradition states that it had a miraculous sort of healing quality to it, and took it out of the parish church in which it resides and then moved it to the Basilica at Vatican City, and has been using it for the Holy Week services. So certainly Pope Francis has been making a connection of the plague in the 16th century, I think, with what's going on now, which is really the closest thing that we've had. The plague in the 16th century in Rome and in England is about the closest thing where communities have been forced to isolate and not come together. I mean, even in like World War II, when places were being bombed, people would still perhaps crawl and through the rubble to be together. They weren't, to my knowledge, mandated by governments not to come together.
Right.
So it's a different thing.
Right. Spanish flu in 1918.
Right, but not for, how long was that? Do we know how long were people? It wasn't months, was it?
I don't think it's more than a year.
Yeah.
I think what is the dark part of human history and in the Jewish story is that invariably anti-Semitism shows up in these moments, and it is always shocking to me that when you look at the plague in Europe in the Middle Ages, that the Jews get blamed for it. Those terrible anti-Semitic attacks as a result of the plague that obviously we did not cause. people right now are saying there are people who have said that COVID-19 is a Jewish conspiracy and the Jews are behind it or Israel's behind it, which is just astonishing to me. Synagogue Zoom calls and Jewish day school Zoom calls, some have been hacked by Zoom bombers, as other groups have also, but specifically by anti-Semitic folk. What I think we really need to be very mindful of is Asian Americans have been targeted because of COVID-19, and that is horrific and simply cannot nor should it stand. Yeah.
It speaks to our human condition, doesn't it? Is it when we're anxious and when we're afraid, we need to our human tendency, this goes back to Adam and Eve, right, is to blame someone else and not to take responsibility for our own anxieties and our own condition and our own brokenness.
We misplace that.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, in our typical format, we have prepared something and yet we have yet to talk about, which is fine. If we want to get on all those things, and it always, I'm always happy in this case to see if there were other comments that people wanted us to talk about. That was great. That let
me ask this while it's on my mind. You mentioned I was struck by the fact that the holiest site in Christendom, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, is closed for the first time really since 1349, also because of a plague. That was the dot being connected. What is happening at holy places in Israel right now?
As far as I know, most places are closed. I did see some services that were being allowed where they set it up kind of like a twister game, where there's there's the spaces and there's squares for people to stand in, but at a distance. And so you could be a part of a minion, so to speak, because if there are 10 squares and then that there are 10, right, that's a minion. But I think even some of that is shut down. I mean, in Israel, they sectioned off all of the cities before Passover because they didn't want anybody going to grandma's house or their mother's house for Passovers, because if there's ever a time that everyone's going to want to get together with family, Passover's it. And they literally, cities were closed from a week ago, Tuesday until like Friday, I think, and then I think they opened it back up. But things are shut down.
While you're looking at your notes for what we're supposed to talk about tonight, let me put another plug in for the Venmo at Karami-Kale for supporting Finnegan's Wake staff or writing a check. Memo line support staff, 620 North Trade Street, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, 27101. We're very grateful for their support and their generosity for the past 8 years, and they're going through a rough time like all small businesses. So we do want to pass the tip jar around for them for the wonderful work that they have done.
Yeah.
What's the agenda?
Well, we talked about, these major themes of like suffering leading to transformation. We talked about, looking at anxiety, how we deal with that, or acknowledging pain. If there was any text or anything that you wanted to bring, I can pull on a couple if you want.
People on Zoom, do you have any questions to address or to throw out at us? Let me check Facebook really quick.
Yeah, go ahead. There was a comment on Facebook about from Elizabeth Motzinger, how much better when we stop being so harsh with ourselves. I think that the role of compassion is really critical right now. Compassion for ourselves. These are very unusual times, and how we respond, and we ought to respond with compassion towards ourselves, and certainly to those around us as well.
Hang on, I can't multitask. I'm having Karami-Kale's Venmo put on Facebook, and I'm trying to pull up and see what is being done on the Facebook.
Okay, that's fine. If anybody doesn't have it down, it's at Karami, Karamy - capital Kale.
Okay.
Our plug for Finnegan's Wake and the staff who are there, who always serve us. And there are, I believe, total, I think he has, I think there are 47 staff members at Finnegan's Wake. So. Yeah. I mean, these are real lives that are absolutely touched by this.
What's one biblical text that you keep coming to just in your mind, reflecting on all this?
So the one when we were talking, and I was conveniently thinking of this week's Torah portion, which is the story in Leviticus chapter 10. It's the story of when Aaron and his sons are being ordained as the priests. And Aaron has 4 sons, and 2 of them, Nadav and Avihu, bring what the text says is a foreign fire before God, and God sends a fire forward and consumes them. Now, the front read of it, or the simple read on it, is that they die. But the rabbis are going to pull this apart and really wonder, because the nature of the language is such that if they burned up, which is what it says, they were consumed with fire, but then their cousins come along and carry them out by their tunics, cause us to wonder, what does that mean? I mean, you would think that the tunic burned up as well. Whatever it is, something awful happens clearly, and we never see Nadav and Abihu again. And when this happens, and Aaron is told by God, stay put, and there's going to be no mourning. Now, you and your sons, Aaron is silent, it says. And I think that in this moment, there's a real sense of being just dumbstruck, of like, what are we supposed to do? And the next thing that happens is Moses issues a law which says you're not supposed to, don't drink any intoxicant when you're serving God. In other words, and the rabbis play with that and they say, oh, they must have been drunk. That's the problem. That's why the law gets issued right away. Then all of a sudden Moses, okay, here's what you're going to do. There are actual things we need to put into place so that everyone's safe and this doesn't happen again. Namely to Aaron's other 2 sons, because he got 2 other ones, and if they're gone, the Kohen lineage is toast. What's really interesting is what happens next, which is that Aaron then and his sons have to bring a sin offering on account of what the brothers did. And Aaron doesn't eat it. And Moses is like, don't you think you should be eating? It's part of the mitzvah. You brought the offering, now you can eat it. And Aaron says, I'm not touching it. I'm not doing it. And it's his own personal response to say, I'll do what was asked of me. I got that we couldn't all mourn, which is interesting also in light of COVID-19, that we can't do funerals the way we normally would and all that stuff. We're not going to mourn. We're not going to do the funeral the way we normally would. I got that we can't be drinking any alcohol or anything when we shouldn't have been doing that anyway. Getting ready to offer anything to God. I brought the sin offering. Got it. Don't expect me to participate in it. So to me, that's saying that grief and anxiety and anger is really real. It's really real for all of us right now. And on the one hand, there is no one way we have to be. And yet on the other hand, we have rules we actually have to follow. Because following those rules are a life or death situation. And it's tough when the emotional experience is so difficult. Imagine for Aaron what this meant to lose 2 of his sons at their ordination. And after already they had a whole week of celebration, all that went with it, to all that grief and that goes with it, and then all these rules that are in place, and he's got to follow them, and it's still it tears him up, and that's hard. Now, looking forward in Aaron's life, I mean, this is Aaron we're talking about. He lives a pretty good record. He's imperfect. I mean, he's an imperfect man because he's human, but he was Aaron, and his life was not done then either. By the way, he would very much carry on. Again, in an imperfect way at times, but he will carry on. So that's a text that when we were talking about this, I'm like, well, gosh, that's right in the heart of this week's Torah portion.
Yeah, there are 2 texts in one theological theme that has hit me. The theme is the fact that I was relatively late in getting onto the COVID-19 bandwagon, meaning that just because we're not in New York, we're not in LA, we're not in Washington State, just thinking, is it, how serious is this? And, and I've got friends, I'm married to a medical professional, and just wasn't sure. I wasn't putting people down, just personally, just wasn't quite sure. Is this much ado about nothing? And so, because I'm fine, I'm not in the vulnerable category necessarily.
Right.
And then I was a little late to come around to think, oh my gosh, this is a big deal, and this impacts everybody, and we have to take this action, which to me speaks to our human condition, that we never take our own vulnerability seriously. Theological word being sin, we never take that seriously, or we always underestimate our complicity in things until almost it's too late, and there is a text just popped in my mind that Jesus says he is, it's clearly hyperbole, but he says, if your eye causes you to sin, cut it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. And that's the one text that terrifies children when they hear it. You have to say it. He's not saying, cut your hand off. He's saying is that this is serious business. And so sometimes you have to take serious actions to mitigate the damage that may happen, which is what we're doing now. We're taking serious, severe action, which may not seem serious when you have relatively small cases in this county, but we're taking serious action, so there will be relatively small cases in this county. That's the whole point. We're doing that action for that reason. The other, the gospel text is one that we heard on Easter, which is when Mary Magdalene encounters Jesus Christ at the resurrection. She tries to touch him, and how just contemporary is this, is that she goes to touch him, and he says to her, "Do not hold me, do not touch me." It's a very famous line of where her instinct is to go and to embrace him and to touch him. And he says, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brethren and say to them," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The idea that this time where we're not able to touch and embrace our community, the rituals of our faith, it's a way of saying is that it's coming, but right now in this time, there's something for us to learn. And so for Mary Magdalene, it was not Jesus, his culmination was not in that moment. There was something greater coming, is the point. And so we trust that in this season of difficulty, relative difficulty, some have it more difficult than others, there is the promise and the hope that something of great fruit will emerge from this. And that's hopeful. That's a thing of giving a hope to that. And then the final thing, I won't go into it, is that we talked about this, is the parallels between what we're doing now with being in sort of exile from our communities, and Ezra, Nehemiah, the two books, Ezra, Nehemiah, about the Babylonian exiles coming back and then having to start over, and all the difficulties and complexities and pitfalls and opportunities that emerged from that. So those are the texts that are just kind of swimming in my mind as we go down.
And I appreciate that. And gosh, there's just two things I would love to respond to. One, that when we were doing we have a memorial aspect to the last day of the festivals, like Passover, and in reading Ecclesiastes 3, the line, "a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing," really has great meaning in a moment like this, to think about there is a time for things, and a time it's not appropriate. And obviously there's that physical element of embracing and non-embracing in this case. And looking at over the course of Jewish history, the Babylonian exile, okay, terrible, destruction of the first temple, and yet many of the Psalms came out of the Babylonian exile. The destruction of the second temple, horrific, and yet rabbinic Judaism comes out of that. There's any number of atrocities over time, and if we go into the modern era, the Holocaust, which we'll be commemorating on Monday night as a memorial, is horrific. That being said, there was great flourishing in Jewish life that has come over the 70 plus years afterwards, namely with the modern state of Israel and American Judaism. we don't want bad things to come about at all. But from those moments, it becomes on us to define what's our response going to be, and what do we do in the face of that, and what do we learn from it? Because if we don't learn anything, and I heard a quote recently, it says, I forget the source of it, I want to say Hegel, maybe, that the one thing that we as humanity learn from history is that we learn nothing from history. That shame on us if we don't. And that's why for us to, you asked a question earlier this night, which was very nice, about, what would be something that we say, gosh, this is good, we need to hold on to this. And Laura just texted in and said, meaning is the sixth step of grief, right? That what do we do with this experience? What do we hold on to? Other pieces we will probably be very much ready to shed, but what do we learn from this? And how does it reshape? There was a wonderful text that the principal of Mount Tabor High School sent around, which if you've not seen it, or people haven't seen it, I'd be happy to share it. And he says something along the lines of, or the principal, I don't remember if it's a man or woman right now, what if? And the principal goes on to talk about, what if, we can sit and bemoan. I mean, my daughter's a senior in high school right now. And so that, for all the seniors right now, are certainly losing what would have been the things that they would have done in their closing part of their senior year. What if being at home right now will lead these kids to value education and classrooms and teachers and custodians and school administrators? And the theme is that what if, and everything gets spun positively of like it's the old story of what seems like a curse may be a blessing, what seems like a blessing may be a curse. What if these things that propel these kids, and no matter what grade they're in, but to take this experience and indeed derive that meaning and grow from it and make this world a better place?
Oh, quite. I mean, we talked about how the canals in Venice are clear. A whole
Right.
generation of people are seeing the bottom of the canal they didn't know existed because of all the boats.
That's right.
And the air that's clear. Now I'm not disparaging the airline community and those who make their living on that, but it is a great pause. I think the thing that I thought about when you talked about all the low points or seemingly low points or tragic points in human history, how we have, that is where our religious meaning comes from frequently. I mean, for Christians, clearly coming off, we celebrate the resurrection on Easter, but we celebrate the resurrection only because the crucifixion came first and the passion came first. Otherwise, it has no point. Doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the response to the critique, that what you and I are doing is just trying to keep people on the opiate of this projection of how we want things to be. That's not true. If we were trying to be the opiate of the masses, we would try to keep people on a high all the time. Instead,
right,
we do the opposite, right? We actually take people and usher them into the dark places and show the hope and the light in those desolate, barren lands, and show that God not only is here, God has been here. And then, for us, that's the whole point of Holy Week, is that Jesus Christ, God in flesh, went to death, which is that which terrifies us the most, and broke its power over us. So it's not as if all we do is, we're living in the warm and fuzzies and it's a religion of Pollyannas. No, we go to the darkest places, and we not only find meaning there, but we discover God is there.
Look, the truth is, we're going to learn a lot more. We learn a lot more, I would say, just to put a couple of holidays up against each other. We'll learn a lot more from Passover than we're going to learn from Simchat Torah. So Passover, we're remembering we were slaves. Simchat Torah is celebrating the cycle of reading the Torah. It's a lot of joy. It's fun. We dance around with the Torah. It's a great time. And there's symbolism and all this kind of thing. But it's the hard part that we learn when we're going to come through next week. We have Yom HaShoah, to remember the Holocaust. The week after that will be Yom HaZikaron, is Israel's Memorial Day, and then Israel's Independence Day. And Israel fashioned their calendar that way because how can we have Israel? How can we celebrate with Yom Ha'atzmaut, with Israel's Independence Day, without first remembering all those who died. And we have to learn from the suffering, or everything else is indeed just light and fluff. And because life isn't, as we are experiencing to varying degrees, and please may it be on the lighter side, but life is not all easy.
I think there's something even intuitive about this, right? Is that I'm assuming it's the same for you as it is for me, is that in modern times, I mean, I'm painting with broad strokes, but oftentimes when I do weddings, the main emphasis, and I understand it, the main emphasis is on the reception to follow, right? And then the religious ceremony is important, but the attention and the resources are spent on what comes afterward. Funerals, however, the emphasis and attention is on the service, and not so much on the gathering afterwards, because even intuitively we know that funerals, which is, where we deal with death, we tend to cling more to the religious message at funerals than people do for weddings. Would that be fair?
Yes and no. With weddings, yes, people certainly spend a lot of time thinking about the after, but don't forget that in a Jewish wedding, which is pretty rich in symbolism and language and everything, what's the last thing we do? Break a glass, right? You're happy? Don't be too happy. Really, I mean, that's why we're doing it. Remember the destruction of the first temple, the destruction of the second temple, all the evils of the things that have happened to us. You're happy? Don't be too happy, because there's a lot of awful in this world. And it's actually one of the things I was going to say about this idea of transition, like, going from suffering and how it becomes transformational. That one of the pieces I will often say about the broken glass at the wedding is that it's still glass. It's transformed. It's no longer what it was, is this formed cup, but it's still glass. And so we carry with us that brokenness of our past, but we're still us. We're still here. We're transformed. We're different because of it. And at a wedding, which is our highest joy, remembering Jerusalem in particular, based on the Psalms, from the Babylonian exile. If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I do not put you above my highest joy, that's the wedding, break the glass. Carry that with us. Yes, we should celebrate. At a funeral, we actually discourage. I mean, people will spend money because it costs money to do a funeral. Yeah. But you're right. People who often may be very distant from the tradition sometimes will suddenly want to do everything according to as much as tradition as possible.
Exactly.
And that gathering of a minyan afterwards can be very important and critical. Yeah.
Well, the good news is we've only lost 9 screens from our height. We're at 51
nice.
from, I'm sorry, 8 screens. So I've said before, friends who are watching, is that in the past, Rabbi Mark and I intuitively know when you check out, when we're preaching or speaking. Now we can see exactly who checks out and when they check out. And so that's the downfall for all this online stuff here. It's absolutely, it gives me all kinds of a complex. Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Do you look at your analytics during a service also?
Absolutely.
During the service?
Not during. No, not during, but later. Okay. Absolutely. No, absolutely. I want to know. I want to know. But it's we're approaching an hour, and I just want to be mindful of that.
Yes, we are.
And just if people make sure we have people who have a chance to ask any questions they want to ask, either on Facebook or on the Zoom. If not, we may talk for a bit more. We may wrap it up.
All right.
Whatever. Nice. Any hands raised? Any questions? Keep talking. Melissa, you don't know what you're asking.
That's exactly right. Be careful. Start reading the newspaper. I was going to mention, and by the way, if we want to make another plug for the
yes, thank you.
For folks at Finnegan's Wake
at Caremy-Kale, Caremy-Kale, Venmo.
That's on Venmo. Yep.
Venmo, yep, easy to download. And I downloaded it before we started. It's very, very simple. You sign up with an email and a password, and link a bank account or a credit card, and it's operated by PayPal, by the way, so it's safe, secure. Or write a check to Finnegan's Wake Memo Line support staff at 620 North Trade Street, Winston-Salem 27101. And we have a question here. Lee had a question. Just got a text. Lee has been mired in between compassion and politics lately. History is fascinating and wondering how our faith fits in with both.
Lee, I would hang in the compassion side and much less in the politics. So you want to jump or you want me to take it?
I'm still forming my thought, so you go ahead.
So I think that I would think our faiths, and I'll just speak for Judaism, but I think we're going to agree on this one, is that the compassion is a really central part of Jewish life. In fact, we right now, this season that we're in now, starting the second night of Passover, we count 7 weeks. It's called counting the Omer. And each week has a name, each day in the week has a name, based on these kind of emanations of God, how God is made manifest in this world. And the first week starts up and it's chesed, which is compassion or loving kindness. That is a fundamental part of who we are as human beings, and God has made us in God's image. And so we are to bring these elements of God out: justice, compassion, loving kindness, strength, awe, or some of the other ones. And so I think it fits very cleanly that, yes, we should be living in the space of compassion. Politics is a trickier one because political movements will come and go, but our faith tradition, our people's tradition, please God, is going to be here for a very long time, regardless of who's in what position of power and whatever kingdom, country, government we're living with. And so the rabbis warn us, and this is back first, second century under the Roman era, and their sovereignty. They said, be wary of the government. And they also said, pray for the welfare of the government. And the be wary of the government is the sense of be really careful. And they'll say, because they will use you to their ends. And the rabbis also say, pray for the welfare, because we need the government, the ruling power, to be whole and complete, because after all, the government plays a vital role in our daily lives. And so we want it to be well functioning and strong. So that's kind of how I would approach her comment at first.
I think the words that popped into my mind, Lee, are, and I've tried to step away a bit. I've been watching the news all the time, and every press conference that is there, I watch for information. Also, it's just interesting. But what does politics try to do? Politics tries to organize and control. And in the best form, to control for the benefit of the most number of people, right? And that's why we have militaries. That's why we have police officers, to make sure we have controlled behavior. We just in the best sense of the word. But the idea is, how do we manipulate our circumstances and to organize and control for the greater good? Religion's about trust, and so I think that what sometimes the anxiety we see is, our politics, we get down not into our most healthy, but into our least healthy, and then our control becomes about power, and it becomes about who gets the credit and all that. And that's where it gets really, really discouraging and disheartening, because there's a greater goal that we need to work for, but the need to control overrides everyone's great intuition. Whereas what we're doing in religion is to say, this very sobering word is that we may or may not survive this, but there's a greater message to be told, in any season, right? I mean, that's where we talk about the deep, dark parts, and we talk about, yet as bad as it may get, God is there, and God is real, and there is profound meaning and transformation, not only possible but promised during times like this. So, lean toward compassion, lean toward the focus on the things that aren't necessarily about control. And when I say that, just to be clear, I'm not saying be reckless and don't listen, I've got a mask here, right? And of course it would be black. But I mean, do the things that you do to take care of yourself and others. I'm not saying live recklessly. I'm not saying drive without a seatbelt. Don't lock your door. But I think you get the point I'm making, is that when we live as people of faith, we're living as people who trust that we aren't ultimately in control of all this. And then we find great hope and meaning in that. Whereas politics, we try to control each other, and it becomes extraordinarily frustrating to watch.
There's a song I'm actually sending out to my congregation tomorrow. It's from Israel's singer-songwriter, just put this together about a week ago, and he's very popular. He's in young 30s and comes from a religious background, but I don't know what his story is kind of in terms of practice today. Anyway, he talks about what's happened so quickly, and he dates things according to the weekly Torah portion. It's just phenomenal. And his chorus is this wonderful chorus. I'll send you the words. What do you expect us to learn from this? How to unite in our separation?
Yeah.
So he's clearly invoking God here, and it's not a matter of like, God is doing this. What are we supposed to get from this?
Yeah.
What are we supposed to be learning right now? We're looking at this situation, and there is what to learn. I just got a couple comments that came in. Got one from Matt Britt, who says, with a winking eye, you should be able to hit a reaction button during all church services, like, love, dislike. That's cute.
It's called the offering plate. People do it already.
And we got a comment from Darla Kirking. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. How are you doing as the ones who people look to for answers? That's very sweet. Thank you. Look, we're here and happy to be here and still keeping our smiles on our faces. And I mean, speaking for myself, on the one hand, I tell people I'm fine. Like, I thank God I have a comfortable home and I have food in my refrigerator, and like, I'm okay. And those in my immediate circle, we're healthy and fine. I'm very grateful for that. And on the other hand, I'm very concerned, really concerned what this means for our country, really concerned what this means for individual families. And there's a lot of suffering that's going on. there's the suffering that's happening as a result of the illness, both people getting sick or not being able to visit loved ones, and it's very painful. And the economic impact that this is having is deep and far and wide. And that is something that we're going to feel for a very long time, even if things were to go back tomorrow. And they certainly won't be.
Yeah.
That worries me.
Yeah, Darla, thank you for the question. What keeps convicting me is, for 20 years now, I've been telling people to live by faith and to trust. And when things get bad, just trust in God. And that's our message, and it's sincere. But now I feel like this is a message to me. How much do you mean that, Steve? How are you able to live in this? Because, as someone who has a church staff of 8, we also, like many nonprofits, I'm not sure if you're doing it. We're applying for the payroll protection program, like so many, and found out today that the fund is out, and our application's still in Raleigh, like behind 5,000 others, and not know what's going to happen. We have a building program starting in 2 weeks, and all the things we had planned, everything just seems to be a house of cards. And so it's one of these great biblical stories of where everything looks to be, everything that can go wrong seems like it is. But what do we have to learn? What can we learn? And how is God going to bring us through and use this horrible circumstance as a great shining light of hope and love and peace and joy, as has happened time and time and time again? The one thing that we as people of the book need to remember is that we can't, it's blasphemous to sort of live in despair when we have this whole record of people who've been in places like this, right? And have been pulled through, and great things have happened. So that's been my constant lesson, is for me to trust in that and not just be the mouthpiece of trust.
Right. There is a series of morning blessings that we say each and every day, and we call upon we use these different names for God. For example, God is the one who gives strength to the weary. And you can say, oh, seriously, I'm really weary right now, and I'm not feeling any strength.
Yeah.
That statement, when we call God, the one who gives strength to the weary, it's as much a belief that indeed God does as a hope that God will.
Mm-hmm.
And when we say that God is Shasali Kol Tzorki, that God gives to me all of my needs. Try telling that to somebody who just lost their job and now can't make rent, and so they're living out of their car, and there's not convenient places to go and clean yourself personally right now. You're going to tell me that God is the one who provides for all of my needs? It's as much a statement of what we believe as what we hope for as well. And so I'm leaning hard into those and having to believe that indeed and again, it's not only a belief in this is what God does and what we hope God will do. It's also a mission statement as to what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
Right. Yes.
Right. This is on me to make sure that those who are tired can find strength, that those who don't have what their needs are, that I, to whatever degree I can, help to get their needs met.
Yep. Just like I think we both in our morning prayers is a portion from Psalm 51. Oh Lord, open thou our lips, right? And so that's a prayer asking God to do that. It's also a reminder that we need God to open our lips so that we can show forth our praise constantly.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. Should we start to wrap it up here, Father Steve?
Probably. How about Caramy Kale, Caramy-Kale Venmo, and Finnegan's Wake, 620 North Trade Street, 27110. 620 North Trade Street, Winston-Salem, 27101. Memo line support staff. And gratitude for Finnegan's Wake for their wonderful, wonderful support staff and their servers. Many of them have been there working as long as we've been doing Priest and Rabbi for 8 years. And they're absolutely amazing. And they're part of the fabric of Trade Street and Finnegan's and downtown. And we're grateful for all of them. Caramy being one of them. Caramy's been there since I think the beginning, at least as long as I've been going to Finnegan's Wake. So thanks to all of them.
Great, and thanks to all of you for showing up. And I was just scrolling through. My mom is on the call as well tonight. So
excellent.
From California.
I'm sure she'll give you a good review later, right?
I'm very grateful.
It was terrific.
Oh, good.
There you go.
There she is.
I was going to compose something. I can say it verbally. Really appreciate your realistic and positive attitude. You make us feel much better.
Isn't your son wonderful?
Oh.
And you are too.
Oh, thank you. I was baiting you for that. Thank you very much.
That's right. I'll call you later, Mom.
Well done.
Okay.
All right, guys. Listen.
All right. Thank you all so
Father
much.
Steve, wonderful to be together. So good to see everybody. It's wonderful, and appreciate everyone's generosity and kindness and comments and everything else. And we will stay tuned for May. Yeah. We don't know what May looks like, but just stay tuned, and we will continue to be in touch. And if I know that if you need Father Steve and me, we are here and happy to help as we can.
Is May your last one?
Yes.
Forever?
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
Oh.
Who knows?
For right now.
Everything is up in the air for everyone right now. So
right.
You gotta do at least one live once when this is over.
We might. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows, Gene? We might.
I concur.
All right.
Thank you.
We're signing out,
Have a
folks.
good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.